Vision Australia.
Blindness,
low vision,
Opportunity.
So Karen, as service providers, we're often teaching people alternative ways to do things, or what we might call disability-specific skills. What are the things that we need to keep in mind when we're teaching those skills?
Well, I think, Laura, that the most important thing is that you should not start from where you necessarily think you should start, but from where the client is actually functioning. And not to just assume that because a client tells you that he or she can do a certain skill, that they actually can, but to literally see the demonstration of skill. Like, service providers get it. They know these disability-specific skills. They're teaching these skills all day, every day, or reinforcing those skills with parents so that they're comfortable to teach those skills. Moving into school and community life, the whole focus on access to information, making sure that clients are using skills, learning skills. But the other thing I would share with service providers, and truthfully with parents, is that if you really believe in these alternative techniques, if you really believe in the importance of Braille, you really believe in the importance of optical devices, the importance of using assistive technology or access technology, if you believe in mobility skills, you'll use those skills yourself. And I think that's the piece that for a lot of service providers is where I think it sometimes breaks down, where people are telling other people to do things that they don't do themselves. And I think it's really important to do as much of that as you can. And I think clients need to understand that just because you are blind doesn't mean that Braille is the only answer, or just because you have low vision that large print or optical devices are the only answer. I think we really need to encourage clients and service providers alike to think in terms of multimodalities for input of information. I realize many of us are getting the bulk of our information virtually these days. We're getting a lot of electronic information flying at us in all directions all the time. But for children in particular, children and young people, I think those foundation skills of Braille and use of optical devices for reading print are critical literacy skills, because those tools will be there long after the electronic gadget dies or needs a new battery. Braille will be there when the laptop is no longer running. These kids need to know more than just AT. They need to know the whole shebang. And then finally, what I would share with service providers is not all of you all the time are going to be teaching across all the areas, but you're going to have bits and pieces of input, I think, right across the age range in these different areas. And also be prepared to share what you know with parents. The more information we can give away to parents, the better off they're going to be in terms of supporting the kids in the application of these alternative skills.
And parents are often seeking out information anyway, so if you're not giving them the information, they're going to be looking it up on the internet or something, right? So better that they have it straight from you.
Yeah. And that they know that you've shared that with them, so that you've got that rapport with the parents just like you've established that rapport with the clients. I think that's important too.
And you're showing that you feel like they're capable, right? Yeah, and you don't have to be in control of it all the time.
That it's a team. Yeah. That it's a team, and you're better off if you have a team with all kids all the time. Children and young people need teams of people, tribes, if you will. Yeah. It takes a village, remember?
Yeah. Often when I'm working with adolescents, teenagers, I'm communicating with members of their team, their teachers or whomever is working with them at school, and they always come back to me and they say they're so disorganised. And you mentioned just before, organisation is an important thing for us to do or to help these kids work on. Are there a couple of strategies maybe for how we can explain the importance of organisation to kids and young people and also why it's important for parents to pay attention to organisational skills.
The first piece is about techniques for teaching organizational skills. What are the people in their environment, family, already doing? What do they understand about what they're doing? Do the children, for example, young children, understand how their family members are keeping up with their things, their clothes, their toiletries? Do they understand how the other kids in the family are managing? Do they understand how their parents are organizing the pantry? And do they know that that's how their dad or their mom is organizing things out there in the universe? Or do things just magically appear and disappear, which we see also? I think organizational skills are best learned, if possible, from the people you already know and love the most, family members, because let's face it, they're going to live there, they're going to need to fit into that system. I think the second technique that I always think about is, what are the child's specific needs? If I'm working with a child who has low vision, whom I may encourage to look at options based on color coding, for example, or maybe we have 6 classes, we have 6 colors of folders. I'm going to try to show those kids systems that are more visually oriented, those kinds of tools that rely on vision but not necessarily print to help you organize. If the child, on the other hand, is a child with no vision or extraordinarily limited functional vision, functionally blind child, I'm going to rely more heavily on tactile cueing. And instead of pulling out the colored folders, I might pull out the folders that have 5 tabs in order from left to right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and organize in that manner with Braille on those tabs. I'm going to show those kids those kinds of systems. I'm going to show them as many options as I can. You can look around in your environment and pick up things that are already available, like shoe boxes. I think of shoe boxes, they're perfect size for storage. You can use a rubber band to keep them in there. You can use 2 rubber bands for a different kind of something that's in there. They need to see all variations on a theme so that they get the idea that there are thousands of options, and each person picks the ones that work for him or her. We offer up the information, we spell out what the array of choices is, and then we step back and we let our clients choose what's going to work best for them. And we encourage them then to adopt it and to see how that works. I think that parents, they want so much for their child to have what they need, but they also want them typically to fit in and to be like everybody else. And this organizational skills piece, what I always try to tell parents is, this is one of those skills that's going to enable your child to be more like other people than different. Because if they can figure out where their stuff is and get their stuff and hand in their stuff, if they can retrieve their files, they're going to be in a better place. They're going to be in a place where other people will see them as capable, organized. And the other thing for parents is, it's tough sometimes because not all sighted people are by nature organized. Some of them are dreadfully disorganized. And so I always try to pay attention when I first meet families, first visit a home or have contact with families, to really try to probe and figure out how well organized that parent is. Because sometimes I'm kind of working against a model where the parent doesn't see the importance. Then I'll have a discussion with them about how organizational skills are critical to life success, because they don't have that advantage of being able to just scan the environment and find some missing item. That they really need to know where things are going to be, and that those things need to stay where they've put them. I'll spend some time with parents talking about the importance of not rearranging all the furniture, for example, without mentioning to the child who can't see that you've moved things, because it's so disconcerting without vision to suddenly not know where you are when you've been using something like a chair for a landmark. If you want to help your child, if you really want to facilitate, you need to figure out what the systems are going to be that's going to work for them, and then follow that system.
I like the idea that you're starting with those really tactile ways of organizing too, because eventually we need to be able to organize things on our computer, and we'll talk about files and stuff like that. But unless you've actually touched a file and put things in it, it's hard to go to something that's electronic and really understand why they've organized it that way, right?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think it's especially important when we think about that labeling construct. And if I've never had to label anything, then how do I suddenly start labeling files in a way that's meaningful for me for retrieval? Because that's the real key, isn't it, with this electronic information? It's being able to retrieve that information once you've filed it. I see kids struggling to retrieve things and have to go all the way across the menu, when was it generated, where was it generated? That goes back to that notion of not understanding the concrete real things versus these electronic things. Yeah. And you can make that transfer, usually generalized from concrete to nebulous cyberspace kind of stuff. But it's really hard to go from that nebulous cyberspace construct and try to bring yourself back down to the reality of what does that look like in real life if you've never seen.
Just when you were talking, I was remembering one of my favourite sessions that I ever had with a family, and it was an 8-year-old boy and his younger brother, and their mother was despairing because they were lucky kids. They had a toy room. And she said, I cannot get this toy room organised. So we sat down and we worked out, I was with the 8-year-old and his brother, how are we going to work this so this works for you? And it was going through, this is what organisation means. It means that everything has a place that it lives, and we have to make sure we put it back in the place that it lives. All right, well, how are we going to give all of your stuff places to live? You've got all these storage boxes. Mum had done a great start to it, but everything was just going in randomly. Oh, okay, we need to label these boxes. How are we going to label the boxes? And my 8-year-old client went, I'm labelling them. All right, well, how are we going to describe this? What are we going to put as the label? And so by giving him some ownership of it and some control of it, I was directing him on what to do and how we were going to do it. But once we had it all labelled, then it was, okay, it's a race. So who can quickly put everything in its spot? And that was a good exercise for me, I guess, in helping understand how he was understanding that idea of being organised, because it was starting to come back at school that he wasn't remembering everything that he needed to bring on a particular day of the week, or he didn't have stuff ready when all the other kids were having stuff ready. So it brought home to me that organisation is not something that you just have, particularly if you can't see. If you're not seeing all those systems that everyone else is using, it won't just come automatically to you. And particularly if the fairy godmother comes in and just sorts it, puts it away, or has exactly what you need right under your hand just when you need it.
Well, and I think one of the important things you did in that lesson, Natalie, was to give that child ownership, to say to him, right, you tell me where these things belong, because if I say, well, then it's my system, and that's maybe not quite as efficient. We need to be creative, and we need to encourage the kids that we're working with to be creative.
Karen, what should we do if we're starting to teach different techniques, but we can sort of get the sense that the parents aren't on board? I mean, that often comes up when it comes to teaching kids to use their first cane, or bring out a magnifier so they can start exploring using a magnifier, and we're just not getting the buy-in from the parents.
At some point you're going to come up against a situation where you're suggesting a tool be used and may even have taught the child how to use it, and then you discover that the parents are not on board with it, they're not comfortable with it, they don't like that tool, or they feel uncomfortable with the child using that tool in public, and they're at cross purposes with us in a sense. There's a couple things, again, that I think you would have to do as a service provider in a situation like that. And you need to sit down with them and say, again, it's my sandwich approach. I really care for you, I care for your child, I know you want what's best for your child, I know you love your child, but I'm concerned because we've been working, for example, on cane travel, and I don't ever see him when he's out and about with you in the community using the cane, which makes me think that maybe you're not as comfortable with it as I'm comfortable with it. So could we just talk about that for a minute, and can you share with me what's of concern? See if you can get these parents to talk to you about what it is that they are pushing back against. Is it that they feel like it's a stigma, or is it that they feel he doesn't really have the competence that you've seen, that he's not able to use that tool as effectively as what you think? Or, you know, what is causing that disconnect between you and the parent and the child in terms of use of the tool and application of the tool, learning how to use the tool and applying the tool? And if the parent comes back with a comment about, well, I don't want him to look blind, or I don't want her to be vulnerable, and if she's blind, I think she's vulnerable. Other people are going to think they can take advantage of her, or they're going to assume that she can't do things that I know she can do, or, you know, this kind of pushback. I'm always going to say to the parent, you know, first of all, if she knows how to use the tool, and she knows how to use the tool properly, there's no problem in terms of this concept of vulnerability, because people perceive someone out there in the community as vulnerable when they are not able to do for themselves, not able to perform a function of life that other people are performing without difficulty. So if I see you kind of groping in an environment, not knowing where you are, not knowing how to get to where you need to be, then you look like you are in jeopardy to me, that you are not capable of getting someplace on your own, that you might be vulnerable because you don't know where you are and how to get out of where you are. Versus if I see you using your long cane and using it appropriately out in the community, I just think, well, you're just moving through space, and that's not a problem. I don't think there's a stigma to blindness. I think there's a stigma to incompetence, and that's what I want to try to convey to parents as a service provider, that the only real stigma in this society is incompetence. So if I see you behaving incompetently or not performing a task that I think you should be able to perform because you're a certain age, then I would see you as somehow stigmatized or vulnerable. So I think it's about helping parents understand that those are tools that we're teaching those kids to use, and that those tools enable them to demonstrate competence, demonstrate skill, demonstrate doing something that the other kids can do visually but without vision. And that's an important message, and I think we need to share that with parents.
Vision Australia.
Blindness,
Low vision.
Opportunity.